This meeting is being recorded.
Good evening. This is the Monroe Planning Commission regular meeting from Monday, April 8th, 2024. It's right around 7 p.m. We'll get started. Hannah, would you take roll, please?
I'd love to. Commissioners present and establishing a quorum. Commissioners Blair, Bull, Dawkins, Lockhart, Lowe, Nugent, and Petrino.
Thanks, Hannah. All right, next item 3 is public comments. This is the time for people to speak to the Planning Commission in person on issues related to the city of Monroe, except those issues subject to a public hearing. When invited to speak, please approach the podium and state your name and association with the city or area of residence. The timer will then be started. Each speaker is limited to 3 minutes. Looks like we do not have anyone here this evening. Okay. We have shifted the agenda a bit and pushed minutes to next meeting. So item 4 is new business, and 4.1 is city branding and mural update. And Becky Hasart from the finance department will present. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Bull. Let me get my screen share.
You're head of the finance department, correct?
I am, yeah, for those that don't know me, I'm Becky Hasart. I'm the finance director with the city. And, special projects.
Yeah, that was special project. There we go.
Yeah. So as some of you may be aware, because I know I've been in front of this commission before, the city has embarked on an update to its brand. This is kind of the next evolution to creating Imagine Monroe. So we started this back in 2022, I want to say, where we completed Imagine Monroe. We've started on the branding, and we started with an online survey, which I think some of you were actually kind enough to take for us. I remember having little cards, both in English and Spanish, going around the city, knocking on all, business stores and restaurants and talking to anybody and everybody who would listen to me to, hey, take this survey. We want your input on what Monroe means to you. And as you can see on this slide, we actually had what we felt like was a really good turnout with the survey. We didn't quite get parks numbers like they usually get. I know that was a little friendly rivalry I had going on with the Parks Department. I was determined to beat their numbers, but didn't quite get there. However, we did team up with Economic Development. And I know for that particular year, for their annual survey, since it was incorporated into ours, they actually had one of the best turnouts for their survey ever. And so they were really pleased about that. So it was nice to be able to combine the two, quite frankly, and it helped a little bit with the survey fatigue that can sometimes happen. But of course, we don't like to do these kind of things without getting that public input. So with the survey, as you can see here, there were a number of respondents that identified as living here in Monroe. And then there were those that within that, there was a subset that identified as both living and working in Monroe. We also targeted 9 different businesses to go out and actually do interviews. And it was a broad range of businesses. Again, we tried to target not just the usual businesses, but we talked to some businesses down on Main Street, downtown, because downtown seems to be a particular area of focus for the city. So we wanted to make sure that they were heard. We reached out to some Hispanic-owned businesses. We also reached out to some Asian-owned businesses. So again, we were trying to cast the net as broadly as possible. We also did 2 focus groups, one in English that was done online, and then one that was done in Spanish. In fact, they met at the library. And it was really interesting feedback and information that we were able to receive from those 2 focus groups. And then, of course, we've had a number of meetings, both with what we call our brand ambassadors, and then with, folks like yourself, and then, of course, within the city, the senior leadership team, and the city council. And the purpose of all of that was to go through and, of course, Imagine Monroe was our guiding light with all of this. This brand is supposed to incorporate and reflect Imagine Monroe. One of the other things that Jay Ray, who is our consultant that is helping us with this, we also had them analyze all the information that came out of the Imagine Monroe outreach as well. So again, we didn't want to reinvent the wheel. We wanted this to be a continuation of that effort. So with that, what came out of it is what we call the 3 Ps. Based on the survey results, all that outreach, pretty much what we have found is that Monroe's personality, those are the 6 words that kind of describe what everybody feels Monroe is. And some of it can be a little bit aspirational. I mean, this isn't just who we are today. It's a little bit of who we used to be and who we want to be. Again, imagining Monroe as we continue to grow, especially as you guys are taking on this comp plan update. So with that, the personality words, friendly, supportive, natural, inviting, playful, and vibrant. Then we identified what our position is, which is where proximity and community converge. I'm not going to read the whole thing to you. It was in your packet. And then our promise, the aspirational part, which is that we are vibrant. We're vibrant and we have meaningful experiences. The other thing, for those of you who took the survey, if you remember, there was a specific question that had 6 columns of words. And it asked you to pick which set of words most resonated with you. It didn't mean that every single word in that column resonated, but it asked you to think about which of those 6 columns you felt like resonated most to describe Monroe. And out of that, apparently there is a science involved with that and with those descriptors that then gave us a visual color theory. As you can see here, based on the words that people picked, the 3 main colors that popped up were green, red, and brown. You can see blue is a very small wedge in that. Would I call that orange? Orangish is almost there, but not quite as big as those top 3. That actually makes some sense when you look at what the words associated with those colors are. We are within nature. That gets into our proximity. We're vibrant, we're passionate, we are growing very quickly, so speed made some sense, but we're also earthy and comfortable. Again, if you go back and you look at the 3 Ps, this is not a surprise. So Jay Ray used all of this information. Oh, and I should mention, as we worked with the senior leadership team, even the council, with the focus groups, we talked about the concept of consensus. Especially with the brand ambassadors. As Jay Ray presented some options for logos, and we ran it by them, the whole idea was we were looking for consensus. When you're a community of our size, not every logo is going to appeal to every single person out there. There's just no way. I mean, you cannot make 20,000 people happy and unanimous on one concept. So what we were really looking for is, can we find consensus? If you are about 80% there, you can live with it. It may not be your top choice. That would be consensus. So this was our guiding principle then, as we've been trying to narrow it down to then what we can work with going forward. Okay. And with that, this started to bubble up as the top choice. Just kind of want to have a little fun with you guys. When you look at this particular graphic, what do you see?
Mountains, obviously.
Okay.
Do those represent certain peaks that we can see when we're driving in?
You tell me.
I don't think they're so uniform when you drive from 522 or on Main Street, like the peaks. You know what I'm saying? Those are pretty uniform. So I'm not sure.
Melanie?
I think the mountains kind of form an M if you look at it too. And then the colors, I like the blue and the green together, even though blue wasn't necessarily a primary color when it came to the color wheel, like the color theory. I just, when I think of nature and like vibrant, I think of like blue sunny skies and stuff, so to have the blue in there with the green. I like it.
Anyone else?
I see a bird or a, it looks like a controller to a video game to me.
I see a bird eagle. I see eagle.
Okay.
Is the Monroe in blue? I really can't tell.
So this screen is not the best to show you the color. It's actually greens. It goes from a darker green to a lighter green, so there's an ombre that comes down. The reason I wanted to throw that out to you is part of there were 4 different concepts that were originally presented. And as we vetted them with the various groups, this is the one that kept bubbling up as consensus for a lot of the reasons that you guys talked about. Different people saw different things in it. I love that you saw the mountains right away. A lot of people didn't see that right away. They saw the M. They definitely saw the bird, whether it was a swift or an eagle, and the aspirational flying up. I've had people say, if you look at the negative spaces here under the wings, they thought rivers. You know, so you think about the rivers that converge here. I also had somebody say that they see the flags from the Speedway. And Evergreen Speedway is a part of our identity, whether we like it or not. So part of what people are starting to embrace about this one too is the fact that various segments of our population see different things, but all the things that they are seeing in some way or form represents Monroe. So that kind of explains a little bit why this has become the consensus. Now, color. I liked where you were heading with that. When we went in front of council on February 20th, this was some of the feedback that we received from the council. While overall they had the consensus on the chosen concept, they did ask about the color blue. We have those beautiful gateway signs out there that have that really nice dark navy blue, for lack of a better term for that. If you think about it though, you've got the wood posts, so you have the brown and that connection to nature, and then the black and the white really sets those off nicely. So there was concern about having a color green that may not work quite as well with that blue. So they asked us to come back and see what this would look like maybe in a blue. There was also a lot of discussion about the font, because you've got this, what they call a sans serif font, that you don't have the little bits on it like you do with the M up at the high school, or more importantly, the M that we use on the gateway sites. They also asked if we could see what it would look like if the Monroe was all in caps. So we went back and we did just that, again, thinking about consensus here. And we came back and brought these back to the council for consideration. So as you can see here, variation 1A is the original one you were just looking at. 1B is that exact same font and bird, but in the blues. And the blues to match the gateway signs. 2A and B is the same thing and the same font, the sans serif, but in capital, of course. Then you have the serif font down in 3A and B and 4A and B. Of course, one is lowercase and one is capitalized. Again, to see what it would look like. And the consensus that council came back with was 4B. With the blue, it stays in line with what we are doing with the gateway signs and with the wayfinding signs. And the font falls in line with that as well. So now, mind you, we're going to get what's called a style guide from our consultant that will help us with regards to how we use this, when and if we should try and incorporate other colors into it once in a while. I admit I played with this a little bit last week and with all of our email signature blocks where it has our current logo, it's got the adventure starts here and then our address and names. I substituted this in for our current logo. It looked a little bit plain with everything being blue. So I can see where adding some offsetting colors would help it pop a little bit more. Obviously, we're gonna wanna see what that looks like on letterhead. You know, if we were to put this logo on the wayfinding signs, you'd want an offsetting color, because blue on blue is not gonna show up, obviously. So, so there's flexibility with it. But again, this has now become the consensus, and this is what we are moving forward with the branding consultant. So what I mean by moving forward, next steps is we are going to now work on what they call the brand architecture. So this then becomes our umbrella type of logo. Ideally, as it gets used more out there, when people see this, they will think Monroe, Washington. And the blue, it does differentiate us from a lot of other communities throughout the Northwest. Let's be honest, the Northwest, we're pretty much blue and green around here. You think about all our professional sports teams, you look at logos from other jurisdictions, they all have some type of blue and green in it. But I don't think many of them have this particular shade of blue. So while we are still Northwest with the color, this will help to differentiate us. So within the umbrella, what we're going to try and now create in the architecture is we have the economic development segment, we have community segment, we have tourism, we have small business. We're gonna try and create logos that play off of this so that they all are connected together, but then each one could represent that particular segment. So that is our next step. And then once we have that, I will ask to come in front of you again. You guys are probably gonna get sick of me at some point. But we want you to be aware of what we are working on. And of course, council at the end of the day has the final say on this. Ideally, we get this adopted this year. And then as we go into thinking about our next biennial budget, then we can start to kind of cost out what it would take to then switch over our patches, our clothing for our field staff, uniforms, letterhead, business cards, et cetera, to start incorporating the logo. I kind of feel like I went through that pretty quickly, and outside of getting you guys a little bit involved by telling me what you saw, any questions? Yes, sir.
I like that. I like that more. The other one was a little bit more subdued. It kind of, not a bad thing, it was tranquil and, you know, peaceful, but I want some action, some power statement. We're a growing community, we're passionate about what we do. And that is what that brings to mind. However, I do like the green color. It belongs in there somewhere. What about a gradient? See how the blue gradients from like a navy down to like a lighter shade of blue down the wings? Can we gradient that down into green as it goes along? And integrate both the green and the blue in the same?
So that's a very astute question. It was something that we did play with. The challenge with any gradient, what we are finding when we talk to the graphic designers, including the one that does this for a living that sits on council, is that when we go to try and like for embroidery on shirts, it's a very tough thing to replicate. And especially if the colors aren't similar or both blues, the gradient of blue. If you try to change the gradients in the colors, that makes it that much more difficult. And so you can end up, either the colors end up starting to look washed out.
Yes.
So that's why it was kind of felt like it's better to just stick with the one hue if we're gonna try and be gradient. Yes, ma'am.
So the irony is that what I saw first was that like the top of, with the first colors. On the screen, it almost looks like the top is a navy blue and then goes down into like a teal and then a green.
Right.
So the gradient actually looks like, I do like the vibrancy of the 4B, and it's funny because while you were saying, before you said that they picked 4B, I was like, 4B in my head, because it does stand out, so, and the blue ties in with the coloring of the wayfinding signs, which are beautiful, and a lot of work went into them. Not everybody loves them, but I love them. So, yeah, if it was doable, I actually would have agreed with the, like, even starting with the green at the top and then going down into the blue or something, so the middle was like a teal, but that makes sense on
And
the, on the line, yeah.
because I tried to make shirts with embroidery on it, and they said you can't paint that word. You can't do a green embroidery.
See, and that's why there was one concept that I have to admit was my favorite. Of course, you know, thinking about consensus, I'm 80% on all of these. But there was one that actually had the yellow for sunshine with the browns and the green in it. And it was beautiful with the gradient on the bird. But outside of printed like this, it just, you know, which is where it's helpful to have that kind of input from your graphic artist. So it's like, well, darn, so what if it's not practical? You know?
We'll get to Liz.
Oh, sorry.
Can you guys hear me okay? Okay. Yeah, I agree with all the current comments, but I do really like 4B the best. I mean, I think, you know, you definitely see the mountains, you see the flags, you see the bird, and I feel like it ties in a lot more of the water that we do have. So, and I like the font a lot better, but I agree if it were practical to have, you know, the browns, the greens as well, but if it's not practical, then yeah. So I appreciate your explanation on all that. Thank you.
Just have one question. So I've gone through a rebranding or two. That's already in the, since you're director of finance, it's in the budget, new business card, stationery and everything.
So what's in the budget is to finish this process. So I think of it as phasing in my head. And then the actual launch is not in this year's budget, but we are starting to think about, and we'll be going into the next biennial budget, which will cover 25 and 26. And so our hope is that we'll be able to support it in that budget.
Brandy?
I was wondering, how much will this change then? So if the graphic designer still is gonna take another look at it and do some things to it, do we think that they're gonna make any changes, or is it pretty well set?
At this point, I would say barring something major popping up, this is pretty well set. It's, plus we needed to finally settle on something so we can start working on the architecture, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Not quite yet ready to go out to the public and say, hey, we have a new brand. Because again, as we start developing the architecture, if we start finding fatal flaws, we may have to come back and say, this didn't work. So we're not quite ready to say we're 100% there. I know that kind of seems like a wishy-washy answer, but.
Another question was, I remember from the beginning of the branding talks that, like you had mentioned a minute ago, that there's gonna be, I think you had said 3 separate uses for this, like city logo, a branding for products or businesses, and then a third one, which I thought was really interesting, was like a community component where people, you know, get around this as like a badge. So like they'd have hats or shirts, and it would be something that people could use for community feeling. That is still part of the process?
Yes, that's part of what we call the architecture. And actually, it's now 5 or 6 of them. So again, tourism, economic development, small business, community, city seal, maybe 5 of them then. I can't think of what the 6th one is right now, my apologies. But yeah, one of them is for residences. So like for me, to show my Monroe pride. I live here in Monroe, been here for 7 years, and my plan is to make this, you know, my final destination, quite frankly. So to be able to have something to represent that for me, maybe like a window cling or something I can put in my car, I would love to have. Especially as, you know, the more I travel and I tell people I'm from Monroe, they're always like, Monroe, Wisconsin? I'm like, no, Monroe, Washington. There is a Monroe in Washington and it's beautiful. You know,
Yeah, that was the piece that I thought was really cool about this idea, is that it's one logo and then it's gonna be used and actively pushed in those other directions. My only feedback comment is that I personally feel like it's a little plain, and I wish that it was like, had like, I don't know, some border on the sides, like, trees, and I also wish that it looked more like the signs that we had coming into town, where they're very bold, you know, the mountains on those go farther, and this feels like a one peak. I feel like it could match that a little bit better with just a few like additions, or the other logo that, you know, the past one, and I think that the park still uses a variation of, is like, that has two separate trees on each side, a mountain in the background. They're all similar, I just feel like it's not quite naturey enough for what I was expecting to see. I mean, even like Dave Hose's mural that we're gonna go to in a minute, you know, he decided to represent the city with mountains. And while that is a mountain, it's just not the very first thing I think of when I see it as a mountain, so.
Yeah. And all of that other people have brought up. Part of it in here, I'm gonna speculate a little bit as I've been working with J Ray, is I think with logos, I mean, you see it larger here on the screen, but if you think about, you know, if it's on a t-shirt or even on a letterhead or a business card, if you put too much detail in it, it starts to look messy when it's smaller scale like that. Somebody else said it the other night too, when we came back to council with this, is that this looks more corporate versus like David Hose's mural, which was gonna be my next topic here. This is kind of more invoking a feeling of Monroe. And hopefully you don't mind if I say into the mural, since you brought it up. This is the other project that I've been working on with David Hose. And what we are doing is we are creating a mural that is going to hang in the new city hall in the council chambers. And as David and I have been working on this over the last few months, the whole idea was to have something that invoked Imagine Monroe again. Again, talking about our proximity to nature, as well as the vibrancy of the city itself. This is the model that he created that we took to council to make sure that we were on the right track before. And this is to scale. This one is 1:3. And the final version of the mural is going to be 6:18. Now he's actually going to produce it on panels. He hasn't decided yet 3 panels or 6. And the idea of that then is that when it is hung at the city hall, if we ever had to do maintenance on the walls, things like that, you can remove the mural without destroying it. Or if we ever wanted to put the mural somewhere else, you don't have to take out a whole wall to do it. So the mural will be transportable in a sense because of that. But the concept here is that, and he actually used, I believe if you are looking east, our actual skyline in this mural. And then, you know, and again, if you notice, it's not quite finished. He hasn't completely filled in what he wants to do with the R, O, and E. The idea with the R is that that is a scene from Music in the Park. So he still has to fill out the crowd a little bit. The crowd is going to bleed over into the O here as well. And then you've got a look up the hill with all the new construction, the homes that are here in Monroe in the E. On the M, he wants to still fill in a little bit more activity here, maybe a snapshot of the Fairgrounds Parade that comes down Main Street. But, you know, again, little pictures, or as we call it, windows into our lives here in Monroe. But you see connection between the letters with the bleed over. You see the lady who's walking her dog, but the dog happens to be in front of the bridge. I know a lot of people, when they saw that, when we had this in front of council a couple weeks ago, were amazed to see that leash go all the way through and just loved it. I had one person say it really draws you in to want to see the detail in those letters. When it gets bigger, I think the letters will stand out a little bit more. David's gonna play with making the border around the letters a little bit thicker so that it differentiates it from the background. And then he's gonna look at putting Washington here, kind of right here on the mural in the same script that he used with Imagine. The idea with that is if someone came in and they took a picture of the mural, we want people to know it's Monroe, Washington. Because there's practically a Monroe in every state in the union. And so again, kind of ties into the Imagine Monroe and the branding that's going on. I will point out, and I joked with people about this, so far, everybody that I've showed this mural to tells me, oh, it feels so peaceful and serene. It really feels like Monroe. One of my staff made a comment about the duck in the O. He was born and raised here and said, oh, I remember playing on that duck when I was young. You know, so it really seems to be speaking to people. And yet, when you look at the color palette in the mural, it leans to the greens and the browns that came up in the survey for the branding. So in a way, I think it kind of really captures what came out of the surveys, what's been going on with when we created Imagine Monroe and the branding. And so I have to say, it's been a pleasure to work with David and come up with this concept for our mural, so.
I saw a mural done once and it was for like a conference room. And what they did was they made it, well, it looked like they were pictures, but it was stickers for a while, so that you needed to change something or update something. It was very easy to pull that off, that section off and update it. I don't know if that's ever been in consideration, but I've just seen it done that way before, and it was actually very cool.
Yeah, David tends to be more comfortable with oils and acrylics on canvas. So, yeah. And we hired him for his, you know, what his comfort zone is. So
That was just like thinking, like, example, like with the E, and like you're saying, it kind of shows the construction and stuff, you know, that might not always be there, but it is part of the path, so.
It's kind of, it looks really good. I wanted to just comment that, like the bridge, I'm like getting emotional about it because I go there all the time, like just walk there from my house. Maybe to make the Monroe pop, could it be that blue as the border? I don't know. I don't know, that might not work, but, cause it does get lost kind of the bottom and you guys know that, but.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
I
It looks
would,
good.
so he did use the blue in the Imagine. I don't know if that showed up in your packet. He has talked about maybe putting that logo down in the corner. I admit I'm challenging him on that a little bit because again, this feels so natural and serene and that logo feels so corporate. I mean, it says Imagine Monroe and sometimes you don't want to throw too much on it. I think what he has chosen to put in here, I think is a perfect balance. You've got the energy within the letters and then you've got this peaceful respite almost with the natural behind it. But he's an artist, you know, he's gonna continue to pick at it until the final product is done. So, but I appreciate what you say. He had thought about the blue also and his concern was with the beautiful purple sky, how would that look on that end? So.
And then the last thing, there's not much diversity in like the people in it, but there probably
He's
will be
adding that,
in,
yep.
in like the parade and
Yep.
stuff, so okay. I'm sure that's
And
obvious.
Yeah, I said, this one's a huge hit. I think that this one's perfect, you know, David does murals all over town. I think it's really smart that you picked him to do this one and, But I do think that since you mentioned it, when you have a second thought about putting that logo on here because they don't quite match, I think that kind of tells us the logo's a little sterile. I don't think it quite represents homey, friendly Monroe.
Well, I'm waiting for Jay. I don't mean to
Yeah.
keep jumping in on
Yeah, I was
you.
just wanting to see how we're doing for time, because we got a pretty full agenda. Are we good?
We're good, because honestly, you only have one more serious topic tonight. The other two were responses to commissioner requests.
Excellent, okay, go Bob.
Okay, I'm just thinking about the possibility. Putting that imagine in that font with that eagle across the Monroe, Washington logo.
I think this is a very busy mural, and it's designed to have a lot of detail in it, because if you think about the final size, 18 by 6, it's designed for people who walk by and see it and go, oh, I want to go look at it. I thought I saw something. And I had one council member say every time he turned around and looked at it, he saw something new that I think would be, again, going back to the practicalities of using a logo that's usually more corporate.
Just imagine. Imagine.
I would wait till you see the architecture.
All right. So, just imagine it. Buy in.
Thanks, Becky.
Thank you, and thank you for your time tonight, so.
Thank you.
You'll come back in a couple months, or?
Hopefully sooner than that, but I'm not gonna swear to that, so. As with all things, as I joke with people all the time, fast, cheap, good, pick 2.
That's the project manager's one. Have it quick, can't have it cheap, can't have it good.
All right, move on to proposed code amendments to chapter 22.22 MMC Downtown Commercial Zoning District. And we have Amy Bright with us this evening. Welcome, good to see you.
Good to see you too. Thank you, Commissioner Bull. Just introductions, I guess, because I know 3 of you, but I'm Amy Bright, I'm a planner of the city. I've been here since 2013. Get this started. Did it again. Look at that. So my slide is being silly. There's a title slide that just really does not want to show up. So this is a workshop. It's an introduction of code amendments. It's a those are city initiated code amendments. So just for some background, where we're at here is in the downtown planning area. So to the west, it's bordered by, what is that? Madison, and then to the south is McDougal, to the west, the east is Alborland Park, and then to the north is the Burlington Northern Railroad tracks. So inside the downtown commercial area, we have these subzones. We have in orange, the East Downtown Neighborhood subzone, and then the yellow is the residential neighborhood subzone. You'll have to kind of imagine the darker orange in the middle there is really encompassing even the red. And that is the historic main subzone. The promenade is right in there in the middle, and really what that is first floor Main Street businesses that face Main Street. So it's nothing on the second floor or anything like that. So it's just an overlay zone right on the top of that. And I think Commissioner Bull may remember when the promenade came to be. I think it was about 2017, 2018, something like that. And the idea behind the promenade was we wanted more walkable, pedestrian-friendly businesses in that area that weren't closed up all day, allowing people to pop in, go to different businesses, things like that. So one of the code amendments that we're looking at is the membership organizations. This is our current code. This is what it looks like for membership organizations. The first second column in is residential neighborhoods, so membership organizations are not allowed in that subzone. In the historic main, they're allowed conditionally. East downtown, they're permitted. And then currently in the promenade, they're allowed as an accessory use. So recently, the VFW came in and they wanted to move into the downtown in the promenade. And you may know they're really involved in the community. And we looked at the code and they were only allowed as an accessory use. And so what that means is they need to have a primary use. It's not a membership organization. They had to be accessory to something else. And so we just really pondered that and it didn't make much sense. How would that fit in? And so they ended up, at the end of the day, getting really creative and opening up an art gallery. And so their membership use is accessory right now. So this proposal is a little bit in response to that, and we're asking to move it from accessory to a conditional use. So for conditional, somebody applies for something that's conditional, they need to submit a land use permit to the city. We look over their application, we check it against, there's criteria in our code, then it goes to a hearing examiner for approval. So we can talk about this now before we move on to the next one, if you have any questions.
Does anybody have any questions about the difference in accessory or conditional use? So it's a hearing examiner decision rather than a community development director decision.
Staff makes a recommendation to the hearing examiner and then the hearing examiner makes a final.
But our overall concept and goal for the promenade is still the same. Walkable, businesses open to the public during the day and evening, not excessive parking use, vibrant downtown feel.
That's right. And so you may, imagine other types of membership uses, maybe.
Well, we've got, the Iron Eagle technically is one.
Or other sorts of community-oriented membership groups, things like that could go in there.
Okay. But again, the Iron Eagle is essentially a private membership only, not for the public to walk by and visit, shop, right? Okay. Bob, you had your.
So membership organization, Iron Eagle, Chamber of Commerce. What else?
VFW,
Right.
the Masonic
Private,
Lodge.
Yeah.
All right.
So I remember the discussion. I remember when we had a gentleman from the VFW come in here and present to us and talk about the challenges. And I'm really glad that they were able to find a creative way to make it work. If this had been in place, then, and they had come in, would that have meant that they potentially would have been able to be in the space just like as the VFW alone without the art gallery that potentially brings people in? Because when I'm looking at all the discussions that we've had since I've been on planning commission, and it started before I came on, with the intention down there being to have things that are open all the time and not closed, like having them be creative and find that workaround so they could come to the prime downtown. It worked out, in my opinion, as like a win-win, because we're gonna have the art gallery, but then the VFW is attached to that, so they can do what they need to do, but there's still the piece that draws people in. Whereas if we're going to eliminate that and make it this way, what's to stop Main Street from becoming now a string of membership-only organizations and that downtown strip no longer being stuff that, all of the stuff we talk about with this comprehensive plan and the goals of the downtown, we have the downtown plan and stuff, master plan. It seems like it might be counterintuitive to be making this particular edit to the land use table. So I guess I'm asking, walk me through how this is a benefit and stays in line with what the vision is for downtown.
Yeah, you have a really great point with that. And that's why we're here having these types of conversations before it moves forward. Do you have anything to add on that?
Well, I was gonna say that the biggest challenge is accessory does not seem appropriate. And so as a alternative, instead of outright prohibiting it, the more logical way to go would require a conditional use permit, because you could say that you need to have the facility open X number of hours, X number of days per week. We could potentially address the parking. You cannot, you need to figure out something other than parking on Main Street. So the way the code is written today is not normal. And so trying to find another possible solution was requiring a conditional use permit instead of as an accessory. Because as an accessory, it's actually outright permitted. It just has to find a parent type use. And so based on experience in other places, it seemed like a better fit was a conditional use permit. But again, we are presenting this to you if you think that this really is not appropriate, because I do remember that conversation. There was a lot of concern about, well, how often are you going to be open? And he was talking about pancake feeds every once in a while, and then ongoing family services, but it wasn't during the day or it wasn't constant. And I do remember that was a concern for the commission. So we are presenting this to you as an idea. If we're off base, we leave it as accessory, but just from a practical planning perspective, accessory really does not feel appropriate for this type of use.
Just to add on to that as well, and conditional use, typically a conditional use permit has conditions, and so that's where we would add requirements in there. That way they're not negatively impacting the neighborhood. So that is a piece of conditional use permits too, but it might not be appropriate.
So would that require an edit too then, to figure out, to basically kind of more fine tune the conditions needed for somebody to meet? Is that something that would need to come forward as well?
No, those are reviewed during the conditional use permit land use review. And we review those against the code, against their comp plan.
Kelsey, did you have?
Well, it was just the same concern that, and he said it was gonna be open like once a week, maybe tops, like for a couple hours. And so if we did this conditional use, does the art gallery completely go away and they get that spot?
Oh, so it would not change what the VFW is doing. This is talking about if somebody comes in the future, if the planning commission and the city council think that it's more appropriate to have it as a conditional use, the way it is now, that's how that business is set up.
And if we changed it, it's up to whoever is on the board to, or whoever's doing the conditional use permitting to decide those conditions without any.
Yeah, and so that process, all of our land use applications that have something similar go straight to our hearing examiner, or it goes to council. It does not come to planning commission. You are the policy setting agency. So we would have to take into consideration everything the commission continually talks about for downtown. The conditions for a conditional use permit are very scripted. And so we would have to use our best judgment, knowing what the community hopes to see with a conditional use permit on the promenade, addressing the pedestrian activity. And I do want to clarify there, with the mix of businesses downtown right now, not everything is open all day. So you have some, and unfortunately, I was not here when this conversation took place, but my understanding is that you have businesses open during the day that bring a particular group of people. And then you have businesses in the evening that bring a different group of people. And so you have a longer day of a mix of different uses that are bringing people in a longer span to enjoy the promenade. It's not just, you have to bring people in at a certain time, because we've got restaurants, we've got bars, you've got the retail. So it's different clientele, but there's more activity through a longer time frame.
Just to answer your question a little bit more, if that particular group was intending to get rid of the art gallery and be a standalone VFW membership organization, they would need a conditional use permit. So they would have to go through the process. They're not necessarily right in there. Yeah.
Go ahead, Becky.
So I think that since, like, no matter who was in the jobs, let's say, and we go with the conditional use, and in 5 years, none of us are all still here, but since the promenade is really like laid out and that overlay and all that, those things would always be identified by whoever was putting together the conditional use packet, right? And they would say, in this area, these are the things that are important because we've already identified it.
Yeah, so when we review land use permits, we utilize the comp plan, we utilize the code, those pieces that describe what those areas are supposed to be for. And we use them in, they're just like they're added in your agenda bill. Which pieces of that area talk about that.
So there's almost more control if you do a conditional use permit in some aspects, because if it was accessory, and generally VFWs are attached to a bar, right? So if they would have just done the normal route of bar and VFW, they would have already been in.
That's
But they had to get creative because they didn't want to have alcohol, so they were like, so they had to come up with another idea. I mean, because I think I heard you say, yeah, if it was something else that they had chosen, it just would have been allowed. And so conditional use does give the possibility of saying no to something if it doesn't fit.
And Amy's correct, in the municipal code, so for downtown, there's actually 3 layers. You've got the umbrella comprehensive plan, then you have the downtown master plan, which is hopefully going to get an update refresh next year. And then you actually have the municipal code, and for each of the sub areas, it's very clear what the intent is. And so that would be a part of what we would be looking at the application. Is it consistent? If it's not consistent, what are the conditions that we could apply to make it fit in like what we're trying to achieve?
Commissioner Nugent.
Oh, okay.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Carla, let me get
Yeah,
Liz.
no, definitely.
Go ahead, Liz.
Thank you. Would we be able to get some feedback from economic development or James Palmer to come in to kind of help with some of those additional restrictions to put on the conditional use, like the hours, because that was a big piece of the concern, was the lack of being open, everything that, everybody's saying. Because we don't want to risk having one of these groups come in and having very limited hours, and it takes away space from the promenade, because so I just want to make sure all of our city groups are coordinating together. Is that a possibility?
Absolutely. So I actually just met this morning with the downtown subcommittee for the Economic Development Advisory Board. They had, and I'll talk about, I was going to bring that up later as well. And then I'm also meeting with not just the downtown subcommittee, the entire Economic Development Advisory Board on Thursday of this week, and getting the same sort of feedback from them as well to make sure. James Palmer is not with the city anymore.
I got Patrick's last name.
Patrick Daughtry.
There we go.
Daughtry is now in his place, and so he is aware of this amendment, but more specifically, the next ones on the next slide I'll talk about, and involved in them as well.
Carla, yeah.
Couple things. On conditional, can the business owner put any conditions, or is it just strictly the city?
Well, I'm not sure if the business owner would want to give themselves their own rules, but yeah, it's the city that's
Okay.
putting
I'm
those
not-
conditions
I'm
on.
thinking general. on
Yes.
conditional. Can they?
So the city, I don't think they've ever asked such a thing.
Well, so I can give you an example where an adjacent, or the business owner or an adjacent property owner or any resident who comes and says, oh my gosh, I can't believe the city's even considering this. I have all of these concerns. I think if you did X, Y, and Z, it would be more appropriate. The hearing examiner will take that comment into consideration. So it would potentially be beyond what city staff is recommending in the conditions, but the public needs to be noticed, and for conditional use permits, it is a public hearing. We have to provide 15-day notice. It goes to all property owners within 300 feet. And what we did the last time we did a code amendment actually is we actually reached out to not only the property owners, which are typically not the same as a business owner, but we also reached out to the business owners. So we definitely want to make sure that that community is participating in what's happening.
That's good. The other thing, you kind of mentioned how like, you know, some businesses are open, some aren't open. And I do understand where some of them are not appropriate or not gonna really help their business be open at certain times, whatever. But it seems like on the historic downtown area, it is, like you mentioned, it's very, for some, most of those businesses to me are for very specific people. You know, it's not really the area where you can just go spend the afternoon and walk around, and it's just not that conducive, it doesn't seem like.
Yeah, and I think we're hoping that it will over time. A lot of the businesses that are down there existing non-conforming, so they're there, they can stay there until they leave.
Right.
And or the same use could come in, a different business if it hasn't been vacant for more than 6 months. But other than that, it just evolves over time.
Right, I wouldn't want to bring in other businesses that are gonna be the same type of situation, I guess is what.
Let me get Kelsey first.
Are there any other membership businesses or memberships on the promenade that this is going to affect? Or do we know?
If the business is already on the promenade, it won't necessarily affect them. They might be existing non-conforming, grandfathered, we use existing non-conforming. It really would affect anyone in the future.
What does the timeline look like for somebody who applies for a conditional permit and has to go through the hearing and the public input and everything like that?
Yeah, so it usually takes a couple of months. And so because we notice the application, we give the public, there's a public comment period for that. Staff time for review, maybe staff time back to the applicant if we have more questions for them. And then more public notice time for the hearing itself. And then after the hearing, just 10 days beyond that for the hearing examiner to make his decision.
And that's all assuming that the application is absolutely complete, then we're not having to wait on an applicant to provide additional information.
There's been times when they can drag on for a long time because of that.
Yeah, that was another concern, because I know, you know, when sometimes if a space opens up, a potential business owner may need to jump on it. And so I know that was another concern when we were speaking with, the gentleman from the VFW, was just wondering, you know, how long would they potentially have to sit or pay for rent or something here before that decision might be made? And so it's just something I'm always wanting to be mindful of.
And, okay, I'm gonna move forward and we can keep talking. So the next section of proposed to be initiated amendments is under, and I think I don't think it's supposed to say institutional land uses, but we'll ignore that. So under the government facilities section, currently, I know that the text is kind of hard to see. Just imagine the farthest column to the right, that is all blank currently. So in the promenade, none of these items are permitted. And likely, you know, the similar discussion that we're having now about walkability was maybe the thought process behind it when the promenade was created. So this proposal is to add courts, government administration buildings, and post offices in that area. And the reason for that is the city recently purchased the bank, the currently vacant bank building near the post office. And they also purchased, you can barely see it in this photo, on the right-hand side, I think it was a chiropractor and dentist back there, that building as well. And it is vacant right now. The The comp plan really talks a lot about having more civic services in the downtown area. And so does the downtown master plan. The downtown master plan does specifically call out the school district, the administration building. The city does not own that. So, but this is something else that can bring the city downtown to be more present. And so going back to this land use table here, the purpose of bringing in court is really just on an interim basis right now where we don't have much space, being that the building, City Hall is torn down, and the municipal court, the city court is in a really, really tight space. And so the thought process behind adding courts was to bring that in on an interim basis, maybe into that building. The thought process behind government administration buildings was to bring in maybe our embedded social worker and getting them closer to the downtown, closer to the community down there. It could also be, some offices where the community has a closer access to them. And then the other idea behind the US post offices, which it just seemed, the post office is right there. Currently, the city of Monroe owns those buildings, but maybe someday they could expand into those buildings. I met with the downtown subcommittee for the Economic Advisory Board today, and they expressed a little bit of hope to maybe add police station in there, not really to, some did, some didn't like that idea, really just to, like the embedded social worker, adding a little bit more presence there. It's not that far from our current police station, just kind of having more presence. They didn't like the idea of adding fire stations, and definitely not the public works maintenance and storage facilities. And so the reason behind a lot of this is just really bringing more presence, more accessibility. The Imagine Monroe, the comp plan really talks about more friendly, inviting, welcoming, and so bringing those in there. Any thoughts on that one?
I personally wouldn't mind the police station, like a bicycle officer, just a ride downtown. The bike officers are really effective at getting around quickly in the downtown area.
We wouldn't have to put a whole station there, we just give them an office
Exactly.
with signage.
And so as you recall, this is a C on the list, so this is conditional, so the city would have to go through the same process as we were talking about with membership organizations.
Garland?
So, I don't know if I heard correctly or not, so these type of things that you're talking about, are you saying interim or just permanent?
So it would be in the code permanently for now. It would be permanent until it's changed. But just the thought process behind why to select these items and not others was that it may be temporary until the new city hall is finished with the construction, especially for the court. There are future thoughts for those buildings, having community events there, something more downtown centric, things like that.
Now, I thought I had heard that one of the ideas was to make it a park area, so that building would go away, right?
Yeah,
In that scenario.
in our meeting this morning, Deborah mentioned well into the future, I think she referenced maybe 15 years into the future, taking down the building.
Also, nothing in the next few years, is
Correct.
quite a bit in the future.
Yeah,
Yes.
there's no money for it.
Okay, okay. Understand. Thank you.
Randy?
Yeah, because when I had heard park down there, I didn't just think that it meant grass, but like a new idea of a park, like community center, gathering place. Generally, I like the idea of expanding uses in downtown because I feel like we're not getting the results that we've been wanting for the last 15 years with the strictness of the promenade. So my thought is maybe expanding would be good. But I don't like the idea of more police presence and offices for the city, except that if it was staffed and then the other half of the building is now open, because how can you have a gathering place, for community event, or, you know, people walk-in space if there's nobody there all the time? So I'm kind of intrigued by it, but at the same time, I'm kind of nervous about it because we're now taking something that I was super excited about, saying, wow, the city actually bought something for the people. And now we're saying, well, actually, maybe we're gonna turn it more into our offices, and I don't really like that. So, I'm juxtaposed on supporting it or have concerns.
Yeah, that's definitely valid, and we, the idea behind some of those right now are just short term. It doesn't mean that there might not be, you know, the embedded social worker and some other services down in the long term, and that this provides for that.
True, except sometimes something short term turns
Exactly.
into long term when you own the building.
But what, go ahead, Melanie, and then I'll.
I was gonna say pretty much all the same things that Brandy is. My concern with it, like, I understand the intention behind it, but if we put this up, I mean, what's the likelihood that somebody's gonna come back in a couple of years and be like, okay, well, now City Hall is fixed, so let's maybe take these off. Like, I feel like we're basically saying that if we're gonna decide this is the likely permanence, at least for the next couple decades, probably. And so if you put a court down there now, and yeah, you think, oh, it's gonna be interim because we don't have much space, but then they're settled, and so now you have the courts downtown, and hey, that's convenient because it's a building, and then they don't go anywhere. And so I'm with you, like, I had heard and was really excited when they purchased the building, because it was, you know, the idea was community-centered space that the community would get to use. I know that if there's not a community event or something going on, that the parking alone will add some parking downtown, which everybody talks about if they've been downtown in the last, 2 years. And so I'm nervous about it too. Like, I understand, the idea behind it, but I have some like apprehension just because I'm nervous on how it could very quickly, and we council and everything, even this board, everything it's constantly moving. We have, elections in this town every 2 years that changes, so, in 5 years, we could have a completely different city council. And if there's a different mayor, then we have a completely different planning commission, and stuff, and so things just change so much that I just worry that we may be going down a path that we won't be able to necessarily easily walk back from if stuff ends up downtown.
It's definitely valid. I just want to touch on two things I don't think I mentioned before, but the new court building at the new city hall, they're gonna want to be there.
Yeah.
For sure. And then the other one is that the city made an investment in these properties, and to protect their investment is the reason behind this right now in the interim, until they have the funding to do those bigger projects down there. Did you want to add something, Kate?
Well, we would have to take it back and discuss it internally, and I would definitely want to bring Lance into this and Deborah Knight, our city administrator, but you can use a tool like a sunset where it's valid for a certain amount of time and then it goes away. I'm not sure I would support that, but that's something that we could have the conversation around. Some of the other things is, so this would be the entire promenade. I can tell you we've had lots of inquiries about having a public restroom facility. So this would help us get that type of a use, maybe not at this space, maybe at this space, but that is a government facility. And so to me, it just gives us a little bit more flexibility. The other one that I've heard, a possibility, which we can't do rent-free, but I've heard the Chamber of Commerce is another one. They are a quasi-government entity. They would have to pay rent, but they would be at least able to go into this type of a building. I'm really intrigued though about what Brandy was saying. Is there a way to ensure a piece of the building, or maybe limit the amount if offices actually have to go in there, or are there other ways to encourage what you're trying to accomplish, while at the same time, in the interim, allow the city to use the building so it doesn't remain vacant? So it's an interesting situation. So I want to think about what kind of creative ways we could regulate.
Because this is a once in a generational opportunity to find a piece of property downtown that's big, that the city has discretion over, right?
Absolutely. And I would suspect, just hearing what Deborah has discussed internally, is there will be a process to figure out what that long range plan is. But in the interim, we have to protect the city's investment. It cannot be vacant. And there are uses that can go in there. I'm sorry, I already forgot our muralist. He will be working in that building, so people can walk by and see him doing his art. But really, the city needs maximum flexibility. How you do that's going to be the question to address, public space. And
so the sunset you were talking about is similar to the lease agreement where like for the courts, 1 year past when the building is fully, constructed and, they're in it, then their agreement would end.
So an example of that is our downtown fee waiver program. It gets renewed every year. It has a sunset every year, and then we bring it back every year.
But the use would go away. It's not just a lease for somebody. The use would sunset after X. Again, I'm just throwing that out as a creative option, and I would definitely need to be discussing it with our community development director and our city administrator. Is this a tool that we might be able to use in order to achieve the bigger goal for the property?
Kelsey?
What was it purchased for originally? Just like it came up and we're getting it, or?
A little bit, yes, because as Jay mentioned, properties do not come up, but in the downtown master plan, there is a identified park or gathering space, and this was an opportunity. I do know that the city has been working with various property owners down there, trying to find land that we might be able to purchase. So it's a little bit of, it's in a plan already that was identified, and there was an opportunity that presented itself.
So I agree kind of what we were saying, so we thought the use was a particular thing, which I did understand that there was not funding yet, so that I did that. So I definitely understand the protecting investment, not letting them just sit there and be wasted. I totally understand and agree with that. But I believe it was in the Monroe magazine, there's an article about it, and so I've talked to some people who are excited about, kind of like what you two are saying, about this idea, this community area, this park, this place to gather. So I don't know if that article maybe is a little premature to get, to flip it to people in the public, I don't know. But obviously that's already been put out, so. But I completely understand I'm not letting something sit vacant and just be a waste when it's been purchased. So.
Yeah, I believe, and again, there's nothing set in stone. The long term, but one of the creative thoughts was a festival lot, which could be a combination of outdoor market space, potentially recreation area. If you can deck it, you could also get some parking in there. But that concept has not been vetted. It's just an idea, because the big plan, the downtown plan, said we need to have some kind of park community center down there.
And then also just to re-stress that obviously we're talking very specifically about one building that the city owns.
Exactly.
However,
Yeah.
if we move forward with the conditional use, this applies to, empty space all along Main Street and all along the promenade. So, yes, it's a condition, the city will have to review it. And then I guess, like, I get that the post office gets added simply because the post office is there. Looking at what we want downtown, if the post office were looking to expand, I guess hypothetically, is that where we want them to expand, is in the heart of downtown, or? So I can sit here in my head and be like, okay, I understand the courts and the government admin buildings and stuff for the city to maybe to use, and maybe the school district if something arises. I am a little also kind of, I don't know if I'm against, but questioning whether post offices really is necessary to include in that downtown.
I love the post office being downtown. You watch so many people walk to the post office every day. I mean, it's probably one of the places that does what Promenade wants. I mean, people are in and out, and, it's a bit of a gathering place, and so I see a benefit to it being in downtown. Whether it could expand, taking up what we already want for the city gathering place, no, but I guess having it be, keeping it on there to me is important. I like it, that you're doing conditional use for other areas down there for it. So I saw in here, there's an action and then alternative actions. I don't know if we're ready to go to that, but, the alternative action is to just continue discussion on this, and that's what I would recommend from here. Not the action of making a formal amendment package yet.
Yeah, so, and that could be a really great way to go, because we're still in the middle of these exact same conversations with EDAB. And, but I just want to be able to give them some of your feedback at this point as we're having those conversations on Thursday, and also providing their feedback with you. Someone just speaking post office, someone today mentioned it's really dated, and I really feel like it needs a facelift as well. So, but they like having the post office.
There's something about, I mean, I'm a history buff, and there's something about, you gotta have some stuff that's old.
Right.
Or else it's not an in-depth community, so.
I will add, I love where the post office is now. I love that it's there. It's the whole, do we want it to expand and potentially, and
I love the post office at the current size and location that it is now.
Yes.
I don't think it
I
needs
think
too much.
That was more my
Throughout
thing.
the whole side of the street
Yeah,
over to where we're.
love the post office, but if they expanded north instead of south, that would be like that.
Yes, correct.
That's all I was saying. I love the post office.
Are there any strong, going back to this, just so I have some feedback, any strong opinions over I know they're really hard to see, but all the C's on the right-hand side are in a purple, so that's like strike and delete. How it is now, or how you think it should be?
I don't have any issue with the uses that you have conditioned here now. And I too, when I first heard it, I got all excited. This is gonna be great, because it's gonna be something we can do for the community. And then I heard my neighbor saying, oh, we need more parking, just throw the building down and put up a big parking lot. I mean, no, that's a waste. It's a waste of our investment. But, oh, no, then, okay, then just put restrooms there. Let's just have a parking lot and restrooms. No, that's not gonna work either. Now, I understand the concerns about the government administration, buildings, courts and all that. Like I said, that we can sense it there. I don't think the area is big enough for the community center that I think we need in the future. But it's big enough to get something now. And it's not the end of, or shouldn't be the end of our goal to get a place where we can have a community gathering spot for the whole community in a central spot with the parking and ball fields and place to what we need, theater, movies, things like that. But no, I'm in favor of what we see so far.
And realistically, that's a flat top roof. If we could tear the drive-through stuff out of there, it could be a festival lot. We just put the bands on the top of the roof.
Just like the Abbey Road deals, right?
Yeah, and the communities
Rooftop concerts.
hanging out in the parking lot.
Yeah,
Move music in the park,
Every
music
Friday
downtown.
night this summer.
there should be a music downtown.
What if on the police stations, it was like police substation as a conditional use? And it wouldn't have to just be in those buildings, but, you know, any of the vacant buildings downtown on Promenade then could make a police substation. You know, some cities have a police substation where it's manned at a desk where people can just come in and ask informational questions and get, you know, Narcan and stuff like that.
So the idea would be to add another line item, and it would just be police substation on here as a conditional use.
Yeah, or modify the one that's
Just
on there.
modify when they're police substations.
Well,
Oh, you'd have to have another one.
it would have to be a new line
Yeah.
item, because that one is already conditional on the other
All the
ones.
other signs.
Okay, yes.
Which honestly is not a bad idea because my first tour of duty here, we had a substation at Galaxy. And I don't remember how that was permitted. But then again, the zoning was
You
different.
must
So.
supply a popcorn.
Well, in
Not a
the,
bad idea, it's also a good idea.
in the same respect, what about like, instead of it being courts down there, temporary courts down there?
I think the alternate, I would not want to put that in the code. I would rather find another tool that we can use, like a sunset clause. Yeah.
So it's all that to say, all this discussion, with the caution that has been stated, I do overall approve of the condition.
And we can continue, we'll decide
Yeah,
in a
this
minute
isn't a
whether or
vote,
not
this is
we're
just- yeah.
done talking.
Carly, you had something.
I was gonna say, yeah, I don't think that there's space to be used as a substation, but others. And I'll tell you, a lot of cities do their substations in their promenade or their main area. That brings a lot of, other aspects that are good to that area. There's a lot of pluses, you know. I agree that would be a good one.
I just had a brainstorm, you know, it's. Is this an overlay?
It is, it's the overlay, so these
Okay.
are the Main Street businesses, the businesses that face Main Street within the historic area.
Can we put a time limit on the overlay?
Like the promenade itself?
Yeah.
It would probably be in the form of a sunset.
Okay.
My suspicion though, is you will have a lot of opportunity next year, hoping that we get to updating the downtown master plan because the comments, that we have been receiving, at least since I've been back, is that we may need to be looking at expanding uses to get different businesses down there. So there's opportunity to discuss.
So realistically, have the downtown master plan, reviewed by planning commission before there's any talk about getting rid of the problem.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the planning commission is the workhorse for city council. So, but because it's economic development, it would be a combination of the economic advisory board. And they now have subcommittees. So it'd also be the downtown subcommittee of EDAB and the planning commission. So it'd probably be those three specific advisory groups making recommendations to city council.
We put a lot of work into the problem.
Yeah. Yes. What's working and what's not working. Yeah, absolutely.
So moving forward, EDAB will make a recommendation, and so we're not there yet either. So we're having these same conversations there, like I said, and if the planning commission tonight, we can decide to move this conversation into another meeting and continue these conversations, or you can direct staff to prepare a recommendation to city council.
When we see it again, can we see what the inside of the building looks like or what is in there?
I
I never went
ask,
into that thing.
I will get that information.
Cause
I
like,
have not seen it either.
and is it open to public to park there now or do you get towed or anything like that?
I have
Cause
no
in
idea.
Imperium, like I think it's
No idea. People park there?
People park there.
and they don't get
Oh,
towed.
We're safe in city property, I don't know that,
Yeah, that's.
Minus overnight, I think it is public parking by law.
I think it'd be nice for the public to know that, just because it is, parking is a problem, so like as a.
We just need signage.
Do you wanna tell them that?
Deborah said at a recent EDAB meeting that it's public parking, we just need to get updated signage. So you're welcome to park there if you're visiting downtown businesses.
You just can't like, the overnight parking is still same rules that's citywide and stuff, so, yeah.
Yeah, I haven't seen any cars there, and that would be nice for the public to know that, just because it is a problem, congestion wise.
Little sandwich board signs that say additional parking, downtown parking this way, just for a while until people get used to it.
All right, so moving on to the action item, I don't have it on here, but it's, it sounds like possibly, it's in the agenda bill. Commissioner Bull, if you want me to read it to you, I can.
Yeah, I mean,
It's on page 18 of the packet.
I move that we continue discussion regarding the proposed amendments to chapter 22.22 MMC Downtown Commercial Zoning District.
I second.
Commissioners in favor?
Aye.
Thanks, Liz. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Making some progress, Amy. Thank you.
Good job.
Thanks.
Move on to section 5, updating Monroe's traffic calming policy. Kate, this is yours.
Yes, so I do not have a presentation. This is part of our discussion at the last meeting when I introduced the multimodal level of service standards. There is a parallel, completely separate process going on regarding traffic calming, and a request was made for the packet that went to City Council. So that is what is here. After reviewing it, I'm more than happy to ask Derek if he can come and speak to you. I know there was a suggestion that this work somehow be blended into the comp plan work, so I have made that request. Haven't heard back yet, but this is truly for your information. My understanding is we do have a traffic calming policy already today, and this work would be updating it, giving us more tools in the toolbox. No decisions have been made.
Okay. Traffic's always kind of a very hot topic.
Yes.
And thank you for including all the survey comments.
Yeah.
All the areas.
Good.
Taking questions, Kate?
Sure, I probably can't answer them, but we can definitely, if you give them to me, I can get to the right people.
I think it's kind of a statement observation, because it says that, there were 112 responses garnered for this. This was very low for Monroe. So while I appreciate all the input and stuff, and I took the survey, so I was one of the people who responded. But in terms of like getting more feedback, I don't know if there's any efforts being made to maybe get a little bit more response to that, or if we're moving forward with like just this. I have the question of, is there going to be effort to receive more responses and more feedback to this, or is this what is the city's moving forward with, just the 112 responses?
I will ask.
I was at a P3 meeting where the company that did the consulting for the survey was at, and they acknowledged, because Councilmember Beaumont asked them about the numbers, and they acknowledged that they were low, but they didn't plan on doing anything else, I don't believe. I had a few things that I wanted to talk about here. So we have the numbers that show the speeds, and these are, again, you probably read it in the packet, but these were speeds that are calculated like through using the car's GPS or computer system. Like they can just, the company that they use can grab the data, and so it's not your speed signs where people slow down and stuff, it's real data. And when we see people on 25-mile-an-hour zones going 10 to 15 miles, even 7 to 10 miles over, I mean, that's a third of the speed limit that they're going over. So we're not talking about a 55-mile-an-hour zone where someone's going 10 over. This is all downtown 25-mile-an-hour zones. And one of the issues with our current traffic calming policy is that it excludes, certain routes that are deemed like, arterials or basically, for the city's current policy, traffic calming treatments are only applicable to local or collector roadways, which excludes US 2, of course, Main Street, Lewis Street, Frylands, Roosevelt Road, North Kelsey Street, Chain Lake, Woods Creek, and Old Elm Road. So, this is from the consultant. They say many of the residents' locations of concerns fall outside of the areas that are covered by the city's traffic calming. So these are all really hotspots for speeding and concerns that were identified by only the 125 people or 112, but nothing can be done about them because of our current traffic calming policy. So my question is, can we find a way to not exclude those from the current traffic calming policy? Since our promenade and part of our discussion earlier is we want people walking around in these areas. When people do not feel safe because there's speeding and there's people who don't stop for pedestrians, we're not gonna make any progress with getting more people to walk downtown.
I agree.
Okay, and then, I'm sorry, this is my passion project is pedestrians, so it's gonna be a minute. The current traffic calming program that we have, we are not even enforcing what we already have. So I know we're trying to move forward and we're asking this consultant, like, what else can we do? We could start by doing something that we already had said we are going to do, which is inform, educate, and encourage appropriate driver behavior. An easy way for that, I know there's standards for how often speed limit signs are supposed to be, but you can also, you can go slightly higher than what the recommendations are, and there are parts of our roadways on Main Street in particular where we're not even hitting the minimum for where speed signs are located. So that would be to inform, educate, and encourage proper driving speed. Also, our crosswalks, most all of them need to be repainted and enhanced. And that would be some of the cheapest stuff on the schedule here, where they're showing us some of these costs that raise up to, $100,000 to $1 million. So I would like us to start by informing and educating. And I mean, on our website, we could have, or we can have signs like in Chelan where it's like, we care about pedestrians all over. You see it as soon as you drive into town. Entering Monroe, we care about pedestrians. Please drive the speed limit. So I'd like us to do lowball things that are cheap and easy and quick and efficient to make our town more walkable. And sorry, if you could follow up on what we need to do to not exclude those areas.
More than happy to. Just want to clarify, this is for your information. P3 and council make these decisions. Unfortunately, we don't have authority here, but I will pass it along to the project manager. And I will keep you informed when it goes to council.
Do you have a question?
I was just gonna echo on things, like I'm a mom who's, most of the time it's just me and my 3 kids, all under the age of 10, and I won't take them downtown. It doesn't feel safe. And it stinks, cause I've been to towns where I've loved being downtown, whether it's, most of them has been before I had kids, but still, I'd love to have a family-friendly area where we could go. And like, I'm even nervous walking my kids to a walking school, because they go to Frylands and there's no buses. And just to get from my neighborhood and then walk 154, when I think I mentioned last meeting, I've seen people that are literally going 75 miles an hour down 154 from Frylands, and it's like, no. So I don't even wanna walk my kids to a school where they're encouraging walking, and so, or to get to Lake Ty, I pick them up by car when we could, otherwise we're doing it. So it's just something to keep in mind too, as we grow, more families come in and stuff, and looking for the safety first and foremost, but just having a walkable city as much as possible.
I've got a question of the surveys. How are they disseminated?
I have no idea. This was a completely public works project. Planning was not brought into the fold.
I've never ever gotten a survey for,
It could have been something that was just thrown on the website, the Facebook page.
Okay.
Who said they took it?
I think so.
How did you find out about it?
I think there was a card,
They came in the mail?
at least that,
They
I
did
think, I don't
mailers,
know.
they did
Like in the mail?
Facebook.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
My
I don't know.
husband gets it, he said, throw away all the junk stuff.
I think I heard about it or I saw it on the city website, and then when I saw it, I shared it, because I'm an admin in a couple community groups, and so I encourage like school families and stuff particular to take it, and try to help get word out that way. That's another reason I'm like, man, that just seems like low responses, because even just where I shared it, you should get more hits than that, I would hope, but and I'm just one
Right,
person,
that's why I
so,
was kind of wondering like how.
yeah.
Thanks.
Randy?
I have another question. So I know you said that, that the walkability and stuff isn't really in our purview, but, you know, I was just at the trails meeting and like parks, the trails are under parks and some of the trails that they're planning on trying to propose are actually roadways that they're gonna change into multimodal. And with our work for, comprehensive plan, a lot of what we're trying to do is to make things walkable, right? Because we need to reduce emissions, we need to do things that include, you know, housing next to services and stuff. So how could this become under our purview? Because it feels like it is.
So you get it at the policy level. So when we're looking at the comp plan, you get the transportation element, and that's where you could be doing policy. But when it comes to implementation, most of the stuff will not be coming to planning commission. It goes directly to city council.
So the policy about our traffic calming is something that we would have input on that.
The work that Derek is working on, my understanding is not under our purview. It is under public works, and they kind of live in a different world.
So planning commissioners can go to the city council. Get our 3 minutes, right?
Right.
They'll read our minutes, so we can put our views in the minutes.
Because my wife has crossing guard duty for private elementary, so she's probably gonna wanna go to city council because it is a dangerous job
Yes.
with the number of people that will speed on flags.
Jay has just a reminder that if you want to provide comment, you have to be in person. And if the commission wants to do it as a commission, I'll have to figure out the rules on that because I honestly don't remember. You can always go as a citizen though.
Citizen.
Or excuse me,
Yes.
resident.
Yeah.
I apologize.
Right, I'm not saying as a quorum.
Yeah.
4 of us would show up, and we have to announce it or notice it, but
The other thing though is we're gonna have at least one more joint meeting with the city council talking about comp plan. So there is an opportunity as well.
thank you.
Yeah.
I live on Rainier View, so I'm involved with the speedway that our speedway is. A question, part of the transportation plan, does that include, and traffic calming, does that include crosswalks?
In the transportation plan itself, yes.
And can we put policy recommendations in about the style of crosswalks?
Probably.
You're talking about raised crosswalks.
A raised or waved crosswalk? My own personal opinion is that little orange flags don't, I mean, if somebody's going 80 miles an hour and they see a person walking with a little orange flag, it's not gonna help. And when I come down through the downtown and I get to main intersections at night, particularly in the rain, you can't see anything on the road. So you don't know that there's a crosswalk there. You have not a clue, and for some reason, everyone wants to wear black. So if someone black is in a black raincoat and they're coming across an intersection, like at Main and Lewis, you can't see them, you can't see the lines on the road. So either put reflectors in the crosswalk or flashing lights or something. And no speed bumps, please, no speed bumps.
Thank you for the conversation.
Thank you. Item 5.2 is Kate again with comprehensive planning, 5-year reporting requirements. And this is just in response to an inquiry from Planning Commission.
Yes, and my apologies on delay. Melanie asked, gosh, it's probably 3 or 4 meetings ago about, what some of the keeping us, oh my gosh, I'm like blanking on words at the moment. I apologize. Yeah, thank you. Holding us accountable. And so state law actually changed. And so I did want to provide you a copy of, it was House Bill 1241. So I gave you a copy of, it's called the Sessions Law. It's a summary of what this does, as well as the specific amendments to the Growth Management Act, which is the strike through and edits. But it specifically states in the law itself that cities must adopt a work plan if you're not implementing, and the first 5-year milestone is after we adopt this specific comprehensive plan. So it'd be 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29. We would have to provide that to Commerce, the Washington State Department of Commerce. And if we're not meeting our, if we're not making progress, then we have to come up with a work plan for implementation. I will say that this comp plan will include code amendments, which is a component of that. It's highly possible that we'll also be doing some citywide rezoning, specifically trying to get at those housing changes necessary to see more units being created in Monroe. So I wanted to show you, I didn't forget, but state law is already asking us to do that, and this is new. That's all. But if there's questions, I'm happy to answer.
Thank you for providing that.
Absolutely.
I won't ask questions today because it's not needed right now. We can have this as we're doing all the other things, so.
Fair enough.
We'll get to discussion by commissioners and staff. We'll start with commissioners. Liz?
Sorry about that. I don't have any comments. Other than stay away from the flu. Been really sick for 2.5 weeks, so hope everybody stays healthy.
I'm hoping everybody does. Looks like maybe one of us didn't. Thanks, Liz. Kelsey?
Just want to thank staff. This was a really great meeting, so thanks for everything, and I don't have any.
Carla?
Yeah, thank you for what you brought to the table. I think it's been some really good conversation. And I know I'm fairly new to the planning commission, so each meeting I'm learning more and more, and kind of in between I'm reading stuff, so it's really kind of nice to get more information and to really kind of dive into this. So thank you.
I missed the trails. Can you talk about that?
Yes, I was at the Trails meeting on April 4th at the Park Place Middle School with the consultant there. It was meeting number 2. The first meeting, they were listening really, really well to, I don't know, maybe 30, 40 people that showed up. And this meeting now, they had taken the feedback that they got, and they were actually doing like walking and biking tours of town themselves. So they were experiencing like any barriers or some of the things that had been reported for, hey, it'd be cool to have a trail here or there. So it was really substantial like work that they had put in, and I believe all their stuff is posted on the website. The basic idea is that you could walk like the whole perimeter of the city limits. Some of it would be rural type trails. They want everything to be pretty multimodal though. And then the downtown and through town, you'd have some specific like highlighted areas where you can take paths, or not like a little trail, but like the whole street is, this is where people bike, this is where people walk, and have that, the streets even be modified so that it was obvious that that's what was invited there. So multimodal, like possibly a street that's not that busy turns into biking, walking, and driving all on the same street. and designate those out, so people are safer because they're using the designated one. So it's really exciting. I mean, I'm sure it's probably also, 10, 15, 20 years away for all this stuff to be implemented, but the fact that we're thinking about this and working towards it is really cool. So again, I think you can check out their stuff there. I didn't hear when the next meeting is, though, but I believe you could probably check it out on the website.
Anything else?
No, thank you.
Melanie?
I was able to attend the, Take the Next Step fundraising luncheon this past week. And I know the city, does a lot of work in partnership with Take the Next Step. And so, there were a lot of community members, from various places and elected officials and stuff and, who were there. And, they just posted earlier tonight that they raised about $25,000 at the luncheon. And so, not bad for an hour and, for future reference, it's an annual thing and the lunch itself is free. So if you sign up and go, you can go and then they tell stories and really give a nice little snapshot within the lunch hour of, what the organization does, so. Other than that, thank you so much to staff for all the information tonight. And thanks to fellow commissioners for all the input and insight and conversation. So, that's it for me tonight.
Thanks. Bob?
Thank you, staff. Great job. I'm very impressed by the professionalism of our staff. And Amy, I want to particularly thank you because you fielded all of my inquiries regarding the Cooper Ridge project. Because I back into that in my house is impacted a lot by what goes on there. And you are always very responsive and thorough in your answers to me. Before I was a commissioner and even as a commissioner. So I appreciate that, and I know our public appreciates that. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. I want to thank the staff as well. I know sometimes the questions come kind of rapid fire, but you guys are so well prepared and it just makes the meetings go very smooth, so I appreciate it. Amy, do you have anything else for us?
I haven't been to planning commission in a while, so
Yeah.
is it okay if Kate goes first and I'll piggyback after I know what she's gonna say?
Oh, I don't have anything other than, I was at Chisab the same night that the trails plan was being presented, and I gave them the first draft of the housing element. So it has now been to planning commission, Chisab, and then I am scheduled to take it to city council in 2 weeks, I want to say, so they'll have it as well. Other than that, I do not have updates this evening, and I know Lance is still online if you wanted to.
Oh, is he? I didn't see his
Oh, he's
name.
not. Never mind. He's gone.
I didn't see it tonight.
Can I ask a quick question real quick, to piggyback, because did they talk at all about their point in time numbers when we were gonna get them back?
That was not discussed.
So, I'm gonna go now.
Whenever you're ready, I mean, seriously, we've got plenty.
Don't be nervous, Amy. I'm not nervous. They're all nice. I just, no,
All the way to-
I guess I was looking for context of what staff usually discusses, and so, thank you. I think that some model homes will be starting to come in soon. I just got an inquiry about that at Cooper Ridge today. And those will be constructed by Mainview.
I don't want to say this on the record, so I will send you when we get it.
Perfect. And then I attended a public hearing today for the new Starbucks on the south side of 2 next to IHOP. It's really just for a dumpster enclosure. They needed to put it within a setback, so that happened today, so that's moving forward.
Okay. Heard about that, Hannah told us about that, so there it is for.
Yes.
You say a new startup?
There is a new
Yeah,
Starbucks.
Lucky number 6.
I was wrong, okay.
Cannot limit.
There was another coffee company that was looking at it, and I do want to put the a comment out there, we do not control the free market on who comes in and who doesn't come in,
We
unfortunately.
either allow coffee shops or don't. But so the idea behind that Starbucks was that the one on the north side of Highway 2 is if not, it's one of the busiest ones in this area. And so it's really relieving that pressure off of it. I do know that the landowner did contemplate a different brand there of coffee. But if he went with another brand, they're acquiring land right now, but they are not constructing the building, so it would have been sitting vacant for quite a while. So that's why he chose, that was his justification for choosing them as a tenant.
Where at?
It is next to IHOP.
Oh, okay, that's good.
But to a landlord, that particular coffee company is very attractive because they'll give you basically a 10-year lease with 2 5-year options. A big corporation, so you know the money's there for 20 years. So it's, and there's enough people that have the Starbucks app, so they're ordering on their way up to the pass. It's just the way things work. So. Right?
It's just funny.
It's funny, even though it completely makes sense to me to put one on that side of the road.
So the new one it is drive-through only. It's not a restaurant that you would go into. It is drive-through only. Just a kiosk.
But some of us still remember that as a self-car wash.
I loved that
I
car
remember
wash,
that.
loved it. But I think that was even further, I think that's where the ramp is.
Yeah.
Okay.
However, the new car wash over there next to the window is phenomenal. $10.
So I'm a little off on my buildings, but there was a self-car wash.
There was, it's great.
Anna, we appreciate you being here.
I told her to go home,
I'm
but
here.
I haven't been trained on the system yet, so I clearly need to
We're not
know how
gonna
to run.
We're not gonna make you talk. We'll just be here in 2 weeks, right?
Please,
What
yeah.
does she have? Diphtheria or something?
I just want to echo Commissioner Nugent's thoughts. Please wash your hands and wear your mask if you're sick and all the good stuff.
Motion that we adjourn the meeting.
Okay.
All in favor, please say aye.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Appreciate the discussion tonight.